Okay, my first video, let me start with this. Let me know I can make it that small. Let's give honor to the source, to the creator, making all this possible, to the ancestors known and unknown. Let's give gratitude. I don't know what happened, I think something. Either way, I like this setting. It like skipped out when something protected, so that's good. Anyway, I've been talking on this subject, and I was mentioning how I was gonna do this passive aggressive behavior. But it's pretty much ties into what I was saying, how this is kind of like part 2 of the dangers of the male-centered woman, and also that symbolizing the false mother or the distorted mother. Again, let's give honor to the source, to the creator, ancestors known and unknown, for making all this possible. We're in the greatest transition right now, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, and emotionally. I believe I said physically, simply because from one era or old world order of something to a new world order. Most of you can relate to the fact of me just diving right in on part 2 about how, even when I'm talking about the false mother, I mean the false representation of a woman, the mother, the divine feminine, and not hiding behind the image of the false archetype of what a man and woman is, hiding behind a false empowerment, meaning that the image and also the energy being used to manipulate the woman, to keep her binded, whichever type of nationality, creed, or color, and also the energy of what the divine mother in itself represents. So again, unapologetically, like, what we're seeing play out here is almost like a dethroning, or the rug being pretty much lifted from those who represented the distorted mother and father. The distorted aspect of what femininity, what and who has been enabling the false mother and father, and also the illusions being cast to distract people to believe that for women, this is how you're supposed to be, this is how you're supposed to even be towards yourself, not see yourself as sacred, as vital, and diving right into it, like I've spoken about, even the aspect of like the male-centered aspect of religion in itself. And so with that, the representation of how women are to be, the positioning, and so forth, and then for the women who represent that, who enable that, who empower that, are a representation of the false mother. So again, the reason why I have passive aggressiveness here is because just some of the things right here you see on the right side of the screen, signs of passive aggressive behavior, evading issues, that I dove into previously on my previous video, how religion in itself being so male-centered, so self-righteous, or keep people distracted from their own spiritual evolution or growth within themselves, honoring their intuition, honoring their feminine attributes, which we all carry because we inherit this through our mothers, emotionally, mentally, so forth, and with that, again, when we're told to take it to a certain character, religiously, no matter what religion beliefs you believe in, a lot of it being male-centered, again, there is this emphasis on putting more energy towards the male-centered, the masculine aspect, taking more action towards that in a masculine way, which again represents a wounded, which has kept a lot of our women, majority, in a wounded state because they're passively, they're suppressing their emotions, they're suppressing their feelings, they're suppressing the memories. And this right here, as you can see, causes moody behavior, evading real issues. Instead of, when I'm saying, if a mother has an issue, or a daughter has an issue, or a child has an issue with their mother, when we're talking about wellness, when we're talking about the well-being of ourselves, everything cannot be taken to a certain sky daddy or a father. Again, the emphasis around male-centered things, or things being more male-centered. And the reason I say this, because the danger in that is, again, if women are not teaching or guiding their children, especially a daughter, to learn about self, to learn about how your emotions, your body keeps the score with what is happening. So with this, you develop a learned behavior, which you see throughout society, where you have majority of people in humanity learn behavior of how to be passive aggressive towards not only themselves, suppressing more emotions, repressing them throughout the years and so forth, throughout careers and so forth, throughout religious belief and so forth. Again, learned behavior. Then you have people who are walking around developing a character, that's what you see right here on the left side of the screen, of a lot of rage, telling themselves that they're okay. You will hear a comment of some, women say like, well, what would Jesus do, or what would such and such do? And to me, I'm sitting there thinking, like, what would you do if you did not learn these things? What would you do? Why? Ask yourself why, if you didn't learn these things, this belief system. And again, a lot of people take it on because it's what they've learned or received, or what's been passed down. But again, I've spoken to people about how the effects, and how even a lot of the structures in place, what was represented, which are collapsing now. When you look at a lot of these generations prior to now, a lot of why and how the male-centered, or even religious figures and so forth, have stood a test of time, had a lot to do with people ignoring the fact of they had to find some type of outlet. They had to find some type of codependency naturally to feel something, or them unconsciously not realizing, like, you have people leave this world with this mindset, with this programming, but never nothing centered, again, the importance of women, them having an image of something that reflects them. So at the end of the day, something's always reverting back to the man. And this is how, again, a lot of women have been lost in the idea of not having to empower, or wanting to feel a sense of empowerment. And their only sense of empowerment has a lot to do with male-centered things, and they don't even realize it. When you look at the distortion of the patriarchal, again, the women who have enabled this, your grandmothers, your great-grandmothers, not all, because some of them still practice their spirituality. And some of them had to use certain religious things as a disguise. I'm very much aware of that. Some of them had to do that because, again, the witch hunt of the attacks on even spiritual women. You still have people to this day that will call so many women, and I know a lot of y'all can relate to this, who study in the arts of spirituality, spiritualists and herbalists, or whatever it is, and people will cast it, like automatically tell them to go to the hell or do certain things and so forth. And again, these are the very ones who hide their hand, who are doing things maliciously behind closed doors. So again, We're talking about the fact of how the manipulation has been used to keep women in a state of not feeling a sense of empowerment, not feeling a sense of standing within their own self, their own individuality. Not to mention having, again, the importance of why I talk about this is that if you did not receive certain things religiously, and the veil is being thin and or pretty much being lifted, when you look at what passive aggressive is, and I'm speaking to you from a place of when you have generations who, let's say, certain things wasn't implemented or introduced to you, most of you will still be following the teachings or certain traditions that naturally your ancestors follow. A lot of you, again, if you don't see how religion in itself is organized and have been to keep energetically people in a loop of their own individuality, their own power, self-empowerment, and the people who know exactly what they're doing. I ask myself, why and how is there so many different churches? Why? And there's so much power in the so-called characters religiously, or whether you call it God or whatever. Why is there so much division? Why are there churches built with just people that don't look like me, that just want people that just look like them in it? Why are there churches, again, growing up in the South, why are there churches that are people who are darker, who are not too fond of people that are lighter? And you don't even realize you're following the same learned behavior. Me learning my research, doing my research and learning more about my ancestry, and then learning about a lot of things in the South, where I've spoken about how a lot of buildings were created to educate or to connect more of those from different nationalities that were darker. It wasn't a church. It was something where we will come to commune, where again you had people who were coming from different places in the South that were migrating there. And I don't just mean from slaves. They were migrating there because this has always been going on. And so with that, when you have people already migrating, when you have trade, when you have a lot of things going on, you have people of different dialects and tongues. So with that, this is where people met up. People were already farming the lands, doing things, agriculture and so forth. There was not always this emphasis on male-centered things. We're forgetting about the importance of how tribes, or even just the fact of what is still presently here today, it's just been diluted. It's just been a lot of things have just been tampered with. Me learning about my ancestry and learning about my grandmothers and great-grandmothers who were spiritualists, who knew about spiritual things. There was so much emphasis on people in the South who would be root workers, who would be medicine men, medicine women, because it's in their blood. You don't hear about it a lot because it was something that was deemed sacred or disclosed, because for the protection of those who were seers, those who were very gifted spiritually, who had foresight, who have other things, clairvoyance, I can go on and on, clairsentience, it's a lot of things, clairaudience and so forth, a lot of things that, again, collectively people have. It's been so much scrutinized, or what's the word I'm looking for, people will be crucified or even attacked for that. So, not to mention the backstabbing aspect of women who were spiritualists, who abused their power to even fall in the loop of being more focused on financial gain. So again, I'm talking about that in my previous video on how the false mother or the distorted woman mother who has been tricked into using her natural abilities and spiritual gifts against herself and her own, and wondering why there hasn't been a progression in herself and her lineage because of maybe the mistreatment of men or maybe the image that she holds. Again, when I'm talking about the dangers of male-centered women, again, we're talking about women who don't have the utmost respect for the father or the energy that the father carries, the energy of masculinity. Let's say a healthy aspect towards masculinity. And that's not gender-wise. I'm talking about, again, through their actions, how they assert their actions, or how they, through their actions, do not have a healthy image towards men. These are the easier targets for, let's say, a woman who wants to work in, if you want, I'm going to use the term dark arts, or to manipulate men with their magic, with their spiritual gifts. And so in that, again, when you have first ladies, when you have people in clubs or societies or whatever it is, that's all it takes for a lot of women to come together as such to conjure up energy towards with that self-hatred, that bitterness, conjure up things to fuel, let's say, a feminist movement. Let's say to fuel, church or corporations and so forth, because they're not even realizing how much that what the seeds they've sown or the hatred within themselves is only going to continue to backfire or eventually come to an end. And so, again, being that a lot of women, some of them unintentionally don't know that they're aware of this, or some do. And a lot of them have a lot of, when I look at passive aggressiveness, has a lot of unresolved emotions, have a lot of, don't realize a lot of their beliefs are learned behaviors due to past experiences. From observing, they may have learned this behavior from observing others or from past experience. Yes, a lot of people don't realize what they're doing is learned behavior. What they're doing is from observing others, mama and so forth. From experience, I can see my mom go to church and all this other stuff. I say my grandma, there were times I didn't even want to go, because when I was looking at the fact of seeing how a woman will lie so much, who will put on this facade, and this is why I say it's so dangerous for male-centered women, because, and how I feel, just from my perspective, how the manipulation of the Jesus character or the Allah or whatever else, it has been used to disposition or devalue the woman, from basically dethroning her from the representation of who she truly is, or the essence of who she is, to uphold her in a righteous way, in a balanced way, in an honest way, was one of the most biggest schemes and like con artists or tricks of the so-called Matrix, to have people believing that they're not as valuable as men. And so the consequences, as it says here, you don't even realize, like unconsciously, what I've talked about, how the relationship my grandmother and mother had so much emphasis towards, or I call it an unhealthy attachment to religion, is because they will have this external belief so much so attached to an invisible man, to where the visible men in their life, they had so much of the disconnect there. There was no emotional stability there within themselves. This external thing they kept looking for never gave them emotional security, never gave them stability within themselves, as much as they search. I don't care. I will sit in front of anybody who proclaims to have been in religion or proclaims to have so much of a healthy relationship with Jesus and God, and really sit down and ask them to the root of that. Well, who are you without it? And for some people, they're deep programs like, I will be nothing without the Lord and all that. Okay, but who were you before it was introduced? And this is where a lot of identity crisis comes in, or psychosis, or confusion. It's because a lot of those women have confused so many children, especially their daughters, into not leaning to their intuition, to their spiritual practices that outdates religion in itself. So when we're talking about how that has damaged relationships, how the consequences of passive-aggressive behavior, when you're teaching a child to take it to God, to take it to Jesus, or to take it to someone else, without you single-handedly sitting down with that child, communicating effectively, being honest, developing an honest relationship. There are people out here who have more of an honest relationship with something externally, religiously or whatever, rather than an honest relationship with themselves, rather than even a solid foundations with their kids. That's where the confusion, as it said, frustration and confusion, the passive-aggressive behavior may feel confused and frustrated and resentful. And this is where, again, I built resentment and frustration towards my own mother and grandmother, because if you're so happy in the church setting, and you giving off this identity, this false identity in the church setting and in the community, but then you come home and you still haven't dealt with this unresolved emotion. You haven't dealt with the things that you dealt with in your childhood traumas, or your adult traumas that you still carry. You just mask it with religion. You just mask it with a lot of things, because again, this is not the fact of like telling people you shouldn't believe. You can believe what you want. I'm not here to convince you. But if I sit down with people and talk to them about what they've experienced in their childhood, some of them have very painful experiences when it comes to religion that is not talked about. A lot of things were forced into people, forced on them. It was projected onto them, never giving them an idea of learning themselves. And that's the thing what learned behavior is. We've learned through other people. And this is how religion in itself, and how dangerous male-centered women are, because if there isn't, let's say, a woman, like something implemented to teach women that, this is where the imbalance and the confusion comes in from my perspective. Had there been an emphasis on how they replace the Holy Spirit, and not like the symbolism of how the Holy Spirit is the woman, or the feminine archetype, the balance between masculinity and femininity, and that creates an imbalance in women to distort their way of how they view themselves and other women. So that being said, if you're having women especially, and then little girls believing, again, I've said in my previous video, to look to male figures for validation, acceptance. This plays out through their relationships. This plays out even the fact of them not being able to see father wounds. These are things that, again, from a distorted way or wounded masculine of being, this damages the relationship. I'm talking about how male-centered women have damaged the relationship within themselves spiritually, and how this has had a ripple effect on the fact of, when you look at the generations of Gen X and baby boomers and those that come before that, who were a part of, again, wars, who were a part of things where a lot of religious things were introduced to them purposefully. Because when you have a woman in a vulnerable state, when you have a woman who doesn't, I'm just trying to connect the dots where I feel how this can make you think for yourself. When you have women who have their husbands or significant others out at war, and here they are having no sense of protection, I feel that the greatest thing one of the greatest chess moves were to have people come and introduce religion in a way so that could be a coping mechanism for women. Another coping mechanism, just like money, how it was used. Another coping mechanism could be housing, Section 8. Another coping mechanism, things to keep them from resolving what's unresolved within themselves spiritually. When you see unresolved emotions, it says they may be holding on to anger and resentment without addressing the root cause. When you see anybody before me, I don't care what type of religion, whatever it is, whomever, if I tell them address the root cause of why you do what you do. Because if we see and sit back at everything, all of what we're doing is either learned behavior, which we consciously or unconsciously are doing, or then we realize like how we have to unlearn the behavior, because if we don't unlearn certain things, it will affect or have an effect on everyone around us. And when you're talking about passive aggressive behavior, can erode trust and create distance in personal and professional relationships. Okay, that being said, the reason why I speak on the male-centered woman, the dangers of it, is because I've seen how and witnessed how it has damaged so much relationships, for generations. Again, have you put women in a forefront where they're able to see empowerment at a very young age from people that either look like them or, because again, women rule by Venus, meaning that, number one, honesty and attention. So if they're given all of their, if they're being given this false perception of honesty, meaning that if you're not building trust with self, honesty with self first, and you're taught through religion or you're taught through certain teachings to build trust and honesty with other people who are not trustworthy, who do not reciprocate the attention, the reciprocity that all women, what is that other one? Attention, trust, there's another one. But again, we're talking about the resentment and the frustration over time that a lot of us, especially when you talk about baby boomers and Gen X who never had the opportunity to sit with this shit. You talk about grandmothers and great grandmothers who never sat with the idea of building something trustworthy, not only with themselves, but when you have men that are being a part of war and been away, who some of them were in domestic violence, or when the men return because they have unresolved issues and traumas or PTSD, so here they are opening their arms and other parts of themselves to men emotionally, spiritually, and physically, laying down, having children with them, and so forth. And again, during these Great Depressions or during the Depression or war, like whatever was going on during that time, this is where, again, baby boomers, because a lot of those people during that time, those intergenerational traumas were just being passed through. And so during that time, people needed people just like this time right now, they were seeking out some type of way to not only feel seen, but seeking some type of guidance. It is no different than what's happening right now. How religion was used, and no difference in how things that are being restored. People are seeking out something to make them feel a sense of relief, a sense of peace, a sense of harmony. And that's what they were doing during the times where the baby boomers women were having kids, and you have all these what do you call those kids, people that travel, when they were in the service or army or whatever you want to call it. Again, think about those people moving around a lot, not moving around, what they were exposed to, what they were introduced to. Okay, as much as your father moved around when he was a part of that, imagine the unresolved shit. Imagine the suppressed emotions and memories, the PTSD he developed. And then coming home, a lot of you have these stories. And then guess what? A lot of you mask it and cope it with religion. A lot of you quick to tuck your tail and say, oh God, or Jesus, forgive and move on. Again, teaching you passively aggressive to be passively aggressive towards the fact of honoring what you feel. You'll say you're okay, but then you're not. Or you won't speak up because your mama or your great grandma didn't. And so you're seeing generations. I know of people of this, generations of women who have been in relationships who, no matter their creed or color, because I'm telling you, I know of people who are lighter who have also been a part of those very men who are now drunkards, who proclaim to be Christian, who proclaim to be all these other things. And again, women who have male-centered minds, who don't realize how much of a danger they are to themselves because they never felt safe within themselves, because intuition or feeling safe and have a safe foundation starts within. Feeling secure starts within. But no, you were tricked in believing that your security was in a man. Your security was in finances. Your security was building a family, but never building security within yourself. That's what you were tricked out of believing. And this has been throughout the last hundreds of years. And that's why the thing, again, where the reason why I said the dangers of male-centered women is that if they're not teaching you, if they didn't have an emphasis on their well-being being a priority, guess what they taught their daughters? They do the same. And then guess what you learn? A behavior pattern. And then guess what? This interconnectedness or this intergenerational or this ancestral pattern or curse, if you want to call it generationally, it's been passed right on to you, and you wonder why you cannot feel like you can get by, or you wonder why that this religious character or this belief system isn't sustainable. And right now, people are looking for God more than they ever wanted to, or seeking out some type of support. And a lot of millennials right now, we're realizing it has nothing to do with religion. That doesn't mean it isn't part of the trauma, but it's also highlighting the fact of how we, as holistic teachers, again, seeing the balance between seeing the balance between the feminine and masculine, what has enabled in the darkness of the feminine to fuel or enable the masculine, which is through our assertiveness, what we see in the physical, what has spiritually been, we've been at war with within ourselves. So again, what has been displayed in the false perception of the mother, again, y'all not realizing a lot of y'all mothers in the last generations. And that's in the spiritual community too. A lot of them have abused their power too. A lot of them have hid behind religion. A lot of them have gatekept the fact of what you spiritually, knowing that your gifts that you have. A lot of them have did it to protect an image of a man. A lot of them have did it to protect themselves, and more so, and I get that part, a lot of them protected it in knowing that you will be the one to come along and break these generational curses. Because what I'm saying is this, is like a lot of the ones that came before us, a lot of that's still here present, they resist to evolve. They feared the conflict of speaking up. Because a lot of women were in dangerous situations, and they don't realize they were in danger to themselves by not being honest. This is why why religion in itself keeps women silent, keeping them in a place of stagnation, never evolving, never truly learning about their lineage, never truly learning about their ancestry. And don't get it confused, a lot of women know exactly what they're doing. A lot of them know exactly from their nationalities and their lineage. They know exactly what they even have taken on from other cultures to try to mask or give off this false persona of empowerment. as if they're into things more deeper than people who originally created it. And this is where you have your what do you call that, the gothics, and people who do other things that are showing you right in your face what they're doing, what they come from. But a lot of them still hide behind the religion, and that's just a mask. And now that the mask is falling, because I'm telling you, you're going to see that a lot of those male-centered women were who disguise themselves again as feminists, who disguise themselves as first ladies, who disguise themselves as being a part of sororities, little covens and stuff. Man, listen, they represented the false mother, and the false mother is, again, as much as they on the surface, in these superficial connections, try to portray as if they believe in God, then while they're serving other things behind the scene, while they're preying on the downfall of other people, and that's even being a part of said systems, which they know that is focused on keeping women in captivity mentally and emotionally. And it's almost like they're a part of the spell being cast to keep people in illusion as much as they want to support it. So again, it's like the tables have turned, because as much as they thought that would continue, all things in the dark, what's done in the dark comes to the light. So due to the fact of how, again, not all, but some of these women who don't even realize like how passive aggressive they've been due to religion. And the reason why it affects not only them, but it affects their children as well, because now their children are conflict avoidant. Now, again, I've said this before, how they hide behind religions or use it as a crutch, as a support system to come off so nicely. And as I said before, anyone who comes off so nice, there's a part of them that you don't see. That's the polarity of things. That's the balance of energies. I've seen this so much in religious settings, but women try to come. Some women, they and that's so funny how they use, again, the power of women that y'all don't even realize you have. They'll come and tell you like, hey, Jesus is the way, or this and this and this and this. And for me not to just question anything about that. But as soon as I say, like, I remember I had an experience the other day, me and my partner went into a place where, again, it says something about international, but then this woman bolts, like there was a setting where she comes in and saying, Jesus this, and I was like, well, I don't believe in that. Like, I don't, instead of like, hey, how you doing? Are you okay? Again, well-being things, instead of coming trying to project your belief system on me. And I'm like, nah. And she aggressively was like, yeah, that's the only way of things, and da-da-da. I'm like, yo. And I know a lot of people know people like this in certain communities. Again, this is how dangerous male-centered women are, because they don't realize that the distorted way of their belief system is rooted in a father wound. They'll sit here and project and tell you, this is the only way of life, this is this and this. If you don't believe in it, then they go home with these ill thoughts, these ill intentions, wanting to pray for you, and at the same time they have this underlying rage and resentment towards you, and don't realize that's spiritual and casting some type of spell or energetically something, just because you don't want to accept certain things, just because you don't want to be a part of whatever it is. And again, a lot of them, some of them in the spiritual community use it for a false sense of empowerment. Again, create groups and settings like that. And again, it doesn't have to be male-centered, but most of the time they know that it's to use and abuse women to siphon their energy. But for those who are male-centered, and why it's so dangerous, it's because they unconsciously don't realize, like, you're wanting to build around enable men not to really honor the woman. And So over time, you've seen a patriarchal who don't even honor women and respect them, who don't even support them. It's like in all that they do, whether it's the monetary system, whether it's housing, it's so many different things. And we'll sit here and say like, oh well, the most educated woman or the most educated person or the most this and this and this is women. Okay, but you're out here begging, well, not all, but you hear people begging for equality, and in reality, it was never built for there to be equality. Because you have, again, men who have been supported by women who see them as the scapegoat. And that's the thing about what a lot of women don't realize they've been scapegoated through their energy, through their actions, through how even the father wound and how systems have been in place for them to be scapegoated through. And again, imagine a system that supports women genuinely, honestly, not to keep them in a place of dependency or codependency, I should say. Because guess what? A nation can rise no higher than this woman. So when you have a male-centered society that most of the things cater to the wounded ego of a man, or most of it caters to even women who truly are not empowering other women, then how are you surprised that things are crumbling, but they're giving off this illusion and fantasy that things are progressing? They're not. They're not. Some of your grandmothers and great-grandmothers are the very women who knew exactly what their ancestors did, or, who supported the very men who had their hands in slaughtering other kids or, women to build their structures, to build their businesses that are mostly either ran upon self-hatred, racism, or even the fact of built upon them trying to come and live a life where, again, we're talking about the fact of they're living as if they don't have unresolved shit, and they're teaching you to be passive aggressive as women. So then that's when you become overly masculine or hyper masculine and wanting to be so independent, and again teaching you to be something that you were never supposed to be. Teach you to be more independent and never unifying as women. Because if something was, think about the center of, you being the center of your world. And once you see the oneness in how women are the center, and in how energy unfolds, where the mother, son, father, daughter, then you will see that from the mother is everything. From the mother unfolds everything. From the energy of femininity unfolds everything. From the darkness, everything comes. But again, being that the focus has been so much on the physical, the tangible things, and not the intangible or the unseen, this is where, if you look at the generations before you, their focus if it's not on well-being, then it's on the opposite of that. And they were also tricked in believing to, now, yeah, they can have their homes, they can have more things materialistically than you, but guess what? Deep down, their well-being, they're unstable, they're unsafe. And that's what makes the male-centered woman in those generations unsafe, because they did not prioritize their well-being. And then guess what? Some of us here, present day, whether women or men, learn that. And that's what allows us to be unsafe, because we have unresolved emotions, unresolved memories, repressed or suppressed, and so forth. One thing it talks about here, passive-aggressive behavior, is the lack of communication skills. They may not know how to express their feelings or needs directly. So again, if I sit down with a lot of women right here and I tell you, I don't want to hear nothing about religion, or I don't hear nothing about God, even if you don't believe in it, or if you do, guess what? Can you tell me what are your needs directly? Can you express your feelings without without the mentioning of anybody else? And the reason why this is important is that it teaches you, like, what is your dialogue with yourself? And you're wondering why a lot of you come from generations where the community, you take it to prayer before you will communicate with your kids. You don't even have a healthy dialogue with yourself. And then again, the false perception of even how religion was used to keep women being passively aggressive, to acknowledging what was really going on with them. How they really felt. They took it to someone else instead of talking to people. Human interaction. And wondering why now we're at this tail end of things, to where the old world order of things is fading. The fantasy. Most of our grandmothers and mothers, they live in fantasy. It's fantasy. And this is where the illusions are falling. This is where the veil is thinning. So most of you now, where it may seem like you could have been in a state of confusion, frustration, realizing how damaged your relationship was, is because the root cause of a lot of this stuff is that you have been in environments, unsafe environments, with passive aggressive people. You have some people who are just at work or just at church as much as they were at work. I remember this very vaguely. Like, my grandmother, oh my God, she went to church faithfully. I mean, like, lady, we did not have to be there that long, hours in a day, where some of us couldn't even be fucking kids. We were, and tell me how that doesn't psychologically, like, play on your mind. That's a learned behavior. And then guess what builds up? Resentment. A lot of us have resentment towards very women and men who, due to their passive aggressive behavior, due to their unresolved emotions, they sheltered us, or they smothered us with religion, with their fears, with their unresolved emotions. They sheltered us, and through this, guess what? There is a huge difficulty in trying to resolve, what has been passed on through generations. And so this is why you see a lot of the healing that's happening within. You see a lot of things we're resolving presently, because you see a lot of no contact with a lot of these very generations, previously that came before us, present day. And so a lot of them are, the energy around that is, we're no longer taking on that stuff, like, and so for a lot of us, we're returning to the root, and in returning to the root cause of the experience, or not being, no longer being conflict avoidant, is that it will reveal what you went through in your childhood. So again, there's so many things. Probably do a part 3 that I can discuss when it comes to this, because again, the collective aspect of how so many, just think about some of you that went through traumas like sexually or abuse or whatever, right? And how the passive aggressive behavior, how your brother and them brush it up under the rug, or say, or protected the predator, or protected the person, or protected the relationship for an image. How certain people will use religion, or take it to God and, pray together and do this, and not even teaching people to, prioritize their well-being or therapy. Because you had a lot of people fear the conflict of, some of us were scapegoated just to keep the dysfunction alive. So, man, I can it's like, and then from that, we're to blame for the falling out of the relationship, or falling out of the family structure. When in reality, this is the consequences. These are the consequences of how, when we're not realizing like how damaged the relationship has been from different structures. You know, I used to tell myself, how can my mother or grandmother have such a relationship with someone in the, you know, who they don't even see physically, or who, and not even just that, because, you know, that's like a statement that, you know, people can also relate to when it comes to ancestry or spiritual. But that's something that, again, I just tell myself, like, just the effects of what has happened and what's been ignored. That's one of the most things. It's like, we come from generations of people who give the silent treatment, or ignoring what's been going on with them. And, you know, and that's the thing where, if you're telling me to take it to someone or go to this, and never really, which I've learned, a lot of my deepest lessons, or, you know, through a balance in life, come from a lot of women. You know, a lot of spiritual guidance, a lot of some of my greatest lessons, some, you know, whether that's painful experiences and so forth. And through that experience, it has guided me to see more of the importance of, why isn't there, you know, anything emphasized on how women are viewed? Why is there images of this and this and this, you know, make you question everything? And so, yeah, I'm going to do a part 2, but I appreciate you all. And these are things to make you think and come back home to yourself, because the beauty of it is that we're seeing so many things crumble. And a lot of those elders are probably going to go through some type of psychosis, or go through some type of awakening, whatever you want to call it, because it's again, they never sat and dealt with a lot of things. This is what has damaged the relationships early on, that we are now seeing later on in years, and now affecting the communities, the society, environments, what else, and so forth. Because I'm telling you, man, the medicine thing is so wild. Because, like, I used to tell myself, when you look at even homelessness, and you see the women and children and so forth, and then for men who are a part of mega churches or big name people, and, you know, you hear about how much finances they have, but for that to still be something right now is crazy. To still see homelessness, to see how a lot of this shit ain't organized to keep people from being stable. Because when you're stable in a place, also, it allows you to sit with yourself. It allows people to sit and learn. But when they're in a disoriented state, or, you know, dysregulated state, it keeps them from really sitting with what is unresolved. So of course you're going to have more churches, or of course you're going to have, again, the church thing where, why aren't y'all opening their doors to these people? And I don't want to hear you blaming, like, oh, they don't want to do that, they don't want to do. How can you have so many churches? How can you have people, men especially, that have millions or whatever it is, men that are in sports, corporations, and big corporations with so much financial wealth, and there be so much homelessness when it comes to women and children? And this is why I say the dangers of male-centered women who are constantly don't realize, like, what they're enabling, what they're supporting, and how the beauty of you coming together and seeing the power in unifying as women. from an internal aspect, seeing beyond color, seeing the fact of what is unresolved within you, to see the bigger picture of what the divine mother, divine feminine actually is. Because as a man who realizing like even how the effects of the male-centered life has affected me as a man, for one, I questioned everything about that very young. Growing up in Baptist, growing up in different churches, it's like I went to certain different denominations and certain things, and I'd be like, wow, this man saying this man saying this. But when I really sit down, one of the things I realized that they didn't have is emotional intelligence. And emotions and intelligence is something we develop our emotional resonance from our mother first in the womb. So with that spiritual insight, it allowed me to realize like, okay, there's a balance between man and woman. But when they come together, the oneness of that, which again, when you look at the Holy Spirit and then replacing that, imagine if the woman was significant. When you say man, woman, and child, imagine if religion, would have said throughout years that the woman and the man and the child was a representation of the Trinity, or the life which it originally is. So it's like, imagine that being what it is. Because the crumbling of a lot of what you're seeing take place, the spiritual war and so forth, has a lot to do with the fact of things returning to what it originally was. And so the beauty of that is that when you don't have our women who don't see power in who they are, but more male-centered things, they will either unconsciously fuel something that damages the relationship with them spiritually, emotionally, mentally, and so forth, whether they know it, but still hoard these things subconsciously to eventually they will come to surface, like a submarine. Because a submarine, the ocean or the water is that of the emotional aspect, the waters, the memory. So subconsciously these things will still play out, and you're seeing it play out. So again, how that played out for me in a male perspective, it's like, where I grew up with mostly women, or I grew up around women, and I'm realizing like, why, if not all of them, because as I traveled, I realized like all women didn't believe in religion. I met women traveling that were into spiritual things. So I'm saying like, wow, why has there been so much emphasis or so many things to have them believing that they shouldn't feel empowered and valued? And I realized like that was the biggest scheme, to make them feel that they have to come into a setting to look towards a man who stands up higher. All this is symbolism and significance. Who stands in a place where the man is saying, you have to come to me to get this word or get this validation so that you can live a life of peace, so that you sin no more, so that you don't go to this place, that's subconsciously programming them to believe that a God will burn you forever. Wow. That's very empowering. That's very valuable. So now I'm taking this subconsciously, the women, and then running out in confusion to why would a God who loves me unconditionally, his son sacrifice himself for me, another thing to have me believe that, wow, I need to live this straight and narrow life. When you go out here and see humans, when you go out here and see people, whether pastors, preachers, and so forth, whomever it is, who are doing the opposite of that, that creates confusion, just like it creates confusion in a child very young. And if you keep giving people, if you study psychology, if you keep giving people a belief system, or give them something visually, verbally, and so forth, they'll take on that belief system. So imagine if the God or source that you were given was to remind you of the greatness, even if you did not make the best decision in that moment. Because that's what I realize of what a lot of religion has done to people. It does not remind you of your greatness, or the people the characters that have been in place. They don't remind you of your greatness majority of the time when you go in there. They're reminding you of the greatness of somebody else that you never fucking laid eyes on. They're reminding you of the greatness or the lessons of peoples that supposedly hundreds of years ago that you never seen, experienced, or even had human interaction with. But yet, once you go home, now you're trying to develop this identity around this character, these people in a book, like a fantasy. This shit is so funny. The people that don't even look like you in your life, like an image of a man that you don't even see on a daily basis, depending on your demographics or, and so forth. There's so many things that, like, y'all don't realize that you should question, because the shit is so fucking funny. It's just like me giving a bedtime story of a person, of people who are in certain demographics in the world who know nothing about religion. But yet, in a society where you see most of the leaders are male-centered, and most of them, again, like I've said in my previous video, don't even have the utmost respect for women. Most of them, these leaders are so corrupted within, which their judgment is here as well, have so many things that y'all have no idea. And I'm not telling people to celebrate their fall, because some people will. At the same moment, there's things around the world that are going to be revealed, that the woman has always been in the picture. No matter what you put out here that men have been this and that, the mother always predates all that. Because there is no man that has stepped foot on this earth or came without coming through a woman. And the reason why I emphasize that is because there should be a balance or more awareness around the beauty, the power, the magnificence, the mysticism of women. Because as much as we think we got them figured out, for a lot of you men who have ran this course, or ran this your so-called race for so long, and then the women who have supported you, listen, they try to figure out the woman, but they cannot. That's the beauty of the energy of how resilient women are through adversity. And that's why you're going to see a rise, when you see the rise of divine feminine and divine masculine. There are going to be women that are going to be activated in these moments and realize the rage and the pain within them. That is just a gateway to them becoming, through their transformation, through their emotional state of what their ancestors went through and what they're going through present day, and they're going to realize how magnificent and beautiful they've always been and will. Even through, if you want to call them mistakes or the resistance of those who came before you, or even present day, you still have always been valuable. To the young women, you still have always been valuable. You've always been a rebel with a cause, or a sorceress, a mystic. You've always been valuable and beautiful. It's like, let me tell you something, you represent like that of a lotus. No matter how much people want to keep you in that state, in the water, keep you, never seeing who you truly are. But that's what your emotions, that's what your life represents. Is that emotional part of you feeling like you cannot outgrow your environment, your circumstances. And in reality, the world is here to watch you bloom. And that's why you are the lotus. That's a perfect example of, in the present day and what's to come, of the rise of the divine feminine. It's like that of a lotus. And the women, the beauty of how they're going to be able to recognize now what's genuine. As y'all break free and liberate yourself from the illusions and the spells and so forth, you're going to realize like how much power you have that has been laying dormant within you. Even through the resistance, even through the trials and tribulations, you are and have always known how to navigate the waters. And what a lot of you who will probably be initiated in Orisha or learn more about spiritual pantheons or things that you come from, you will realize that the if I can say this in a spiritual sense, like your waters just have been dirty and tainted. And then you learn from women whose waters were dirty. And what do I mean by that? It's like, imagine your subconscious being dirty and tainted and with toxins and so forth, right? And then the murkiest of water, until you clear those things within yourself emotionally, whether unresolved and ancestrally and so forth, spiritually, mentally, emotionally and so forth. Then as that declutters, as you declutter these things or remove them, is the word detoxify or and so forth, as you detoxify yourself spiritually, mentally, emotionally and so forth, your waters will be clear. And the waters represent the waters of your body. You're made up of water, the spiritual memory, the ancestral memory, and also in your womb space. That's the beauty of this. And I don't care where you are. I don't care if you're in a marriage. I don't care if you're whatever career status and so forth, whether you have 30 kids. I don't care. It doesn't matter to source, to the creator, because you are here to do something more magnificent. You have the opportunity to be better, and you will, and you shall. And even if the ones before you didn't get it, I ain't even gonna say so much right, it's so much aligned, is that even by you starting today by doing better, just know that you are a mirror or inspiration to the youth that's watching you. Be better for you, and in your being better for you, they will be better for themselves. That's the beauty of it. That's the thing about being a cycle breaker and a generational curse breaker. You don't have to hurt no more. It doesn't have to hurt anymore. But the process of getting through it is realizing that your pain will become gain. You are loved, you are magnificent, you are valuable. Peace and blessing. Shalom.